One Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is Trev from Trevessence, and today we are going to continue the reading of Spare, the book written by Prince Harry. For those of you who have been following me as I read this book, you would have known that we are now on to part 2, and today we are going to start reading chapter 12 of part 2. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed to my channel, now is a good time to do so. And to all my returning travelers, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now let's read chapter 12 of part 2. The rover had an alternative name because everything in the army needed an alternative name. Kill TV, as in, what you doing? Just watching a bit of Kill TV. The name was meant to be ironic, I figured, or else it was just blatantly fake advertising, because the only thing getting killed was time. You watched an abandoned compound thought to have been used by the Taliban. Nothing happened. You watched a tunnel system suspected to have been used by the Taliban. Nothing happened. You watched a sand dune and another sand dune. If there's anything duller than watching paint dry, it's watching desert. Desert. I wondered how Baxter hadn't gone mad. So I asked him. He said that after hours of nothing, there'd be something. The trick was staying alert for that. If Kill TV was dull, Kill TV, Kill Radio was mad. All the handsets along the desk gave off a constant babble in a dozen accents: British, American, Dutch, French, to say nothing of the various personalities. I began trying to match the accents with the call signs. American pilots were dude, Dutch pilots were rammet, French were mirage or raj, Brits were vapor, Apache helicopters were called ugly. My personal call sign was Widow 67. Baxter told me to grab a handset, say hello, introduce yourself. When I did, the voices all perked up, turned their attention to me. They were like baby birds demanding to be fed. Their food was information. Who are you? What's happening down there? Where am I? Besides information, the thing they wanted more often was permission to enter my airspace or to leave it. Rules forbade pilots to pass overhead without assurance that it was safe, that a battle wasn't raging, that Dwyer wasn't blasting away its heavy guns. In other words, was it a hot ROS, restricted operating zone, or cold? Everything about the war revolved around this binary question: hostilities, weather, water, food, hot or cold. I like this role, keeper of the ROS. I like the idea of working closely with Top Guns, being the eyes and ears for such highly skilled men and women, their last link to terra firma, their alpha and omega. I was Earth. Their need for me, their dependency, created instant bonds. Strange emotions flowed. Weird intimacies took shape. Hey there, Widow 67. Hey, dude, how's your day? Quiet so far, dude. We were mates instantly, comrades, you could feel it. After they checked in with me, I ran them over to the FAC in Carsmere, a little river town nearby. Thanks, Widow 67. Good night, Raja, dude. Stay safe. Chapter 13. After receiving permission to cross my airspace, a pilot wouldn't always cruise on through. He'd arrow through, and sometimes his need to know conditions on the ground would be urgent. Every second mattered. Life and death were in my hands. I was calmly seated at a desk, holding a fizzy drink and a biro or barrow. Wow. But I was also in the middle of the action. It was exhilarating, the thing I trained for, but terrifying. Shortly before my arrival on FAC, An FAC got one number wrong when reading out the geo coordinates to an American F 15. The result was an errant bomb landing on British forces instead of the enemy. 3 soldiers killed, 2 horribly maimed. So every word and digit I spoke would have consequences. We were providing support. That was the phrase used constantly. But I realized how euphemistic it was. No less than the pilots, we were sometimes delivering death. And when it came to death, more so than life, you had to be precise. I confess, I was happy. This was important work, patriotic work. I was using skills honed in the Dales and at Sandringham and all the way back to boyhood, even to Balmoral. There was a bright line connecting with my stalking with Sandy and my work here now. I was a British soldier on the battlefield at last, a role for which I'd been preparing all my life. I was also widow 6'7". I'd had plenty of I'd have plenty of nicknames in my life, but this was the first nickname that felt more like an alias. I could really and truly hide behind it. For the first time, I was just a name, a random name, and a random number, no title, and no bodyguards. Is this what other people feel like every day? I savored the normality, wallowed in it, and also considered how far I journeyed to find it. Central Afghanistan, the dead of winter, the middle of the night, the midst of a war, while speaking to a man 15,000 feet above my head. How abnormal is your life if that's the first place you ever feel normal? After every action, there would be a lull, which was sometimes harder to deal with psychologically. Boredom was the enemy, and we fought it by playing rugby, our ball a heavily taped up roll of loo paper, or by jogging on the spot. We also had we also did 1,000 press-ups and built primitive weightlifting equipment, taping wooden crates to metal bars. We made pong balls out of duffels. We read books, organized marathon chess matches, slept like cats. I watched grown men log 12 hours in a day bed. We also ate and ate and ate. Dwyer had a full kitchen, pasta, chips, beans. We were given 30 minutes each week on the sat phone. The phone card was called Paradigm, and it had a code on the back, which was punched into the keypad. Then a robot, a nice sounding woman, told you how many minutes you had left. Next time you knew. Spike, that's you? Charles, your old life down the line. The sound always made you catch your breath. To think of home was never easy for a complex set of reasons. To hear home was like a stab in the chest. If I didn't call Chels, I called Pa. How are you, darling boy? Not bad, you know. But he asked me to write rather than call. He loved letters. He said he'd much rather a letter than a call. Prince Charles is really weird sometimes, guys. At times, I worried that I was actually missing out on the real war. Was I perhaps sitting in the war's waiting room? The real war, I feared, was just down the valley. I could see the thick plumes of smoke, the plumes from explosions, mostly in and around Carsmere, a place of tremendous strategic importance, critical gateway, river port through which supplies, especially guns, flowed to the Taliban, plus an entry point for new fighters. They'd be issued an AK-47, a fistful of bullets, and and told told to head towards us through their maze of tunnels. This was their invitation test, which the Taliban called their blooding. Were Sandy and Tiggy working for the Taliban? It happened often. A Taliban recruit would pop up, fire at us, and we return fire with 20 times the force. Any Taliban recruit who survived that barrage would then be promoted, sent to fight and die in one of the bigger cities, like Geresh or Lashkar Gah, which was called Las Vegas. Most, however, didn't survive. The Taliban left their bodies to rot. I watched dogs the size of wolves chew many a recruit off the battlefield. I began pleading with my commanding officers, get me out of here. A few guys made the same plea, but for different reasons. I was begging to go closer to the front. Send me into Kashmir. Norland, what's up, my friend? What are you doing? Good to see you. Thank you for dropping in. Finally, on Christmas Eve of 2007, my request was approved. I was to replace an outgoing FAC at Forward Operating Base Delhi, which was inside an abandoned Kashmir school. Small gravel courtyard, corrugated tin roof. Someone said the school had been an agricultural university. Someone else said it had been a madrasa. For the moment, however, it was a part of the British Commonwealth and my new home. It was also home to a company of Gurkhas recruited from Nepal, from the remotest villages along the foothills of the Himalayas. The Gurkhas had fought in every British war of the last 2 centuries and distinguished themselves in each one. They scraped like tigers, never gave up, and as a result, they held a special place in the British Army and in my heart. I'd been hearing about the Gurkhas since I was a boy. One of the first uniforms I'd ever worn was a Gurkha uniform. At Sandhurst, the Gurkhas always played the enemy in military exercises, which always felt a bit ridiculous because they were beloved. After the exercises, a Gurkha would wait, guys, I gotta take the cover off this thing because it is annoying. After the exercise, a Gurkha would invariably walk up to me and offer me a cup of hot chocolate. They had a solemn reverence for royalty. A king, to their minds, was divine. Their own king was believed to be the reincarnated Hindu god Vishnu. A prince, therefore, wasn't far off. I'd felt this growing up, but now felt it again. As I walked through Delhi, the Gurkhas all bowed. They called me Saab. Yes, Saab. No, Saab. I pleaded, don't. I'm just Lieutenant Wales. I'm just widow 6-7. They laughed. No chance, Saab. Neither would they have dreamed of allowing me to go anywhere by myself. Royal persons required royal escort. Often I'd be headed to the mess or the loo and suddenly become aware of a shadow on my right, then another on my left. Hello, Sab. It was embarrassing, albeit touching. I adored them, as did the local Afghans, who sold the Gurkhas many chickens and goats and even bantered with them about recipes. The army the army talked a lot about winning Afghan hearts and minds, meaning converting locals to democracy and freedom. But only the Gurkhas seemed to be actually doing it. When they weren't escorting me, the Gurkhas were intent on fattening me with food. Food was their love language, and while each Gurkha thought himself a five-star chef, they all had the same specialty, goat curry. Well, Harry, it's curried goat. All right, but we're going to say goat curry because that's what he wrote. Like chicken curry. Have you ever heard that, guys? I always chuckle whenever I hear people say goat curry or chicken curry. I'm like, what in the world? But anyway, let's continue. Thank you all for being here. Don't forget to like the live and share out the live. Invite other people to come on over and listen to the book. I know a lot of you are not going to buy the book, but you can always count on me. I will buy it and I will read it for you. I remember one day hearing rotors overhead. I looked up. Everyone on the base looked up. A chopper slowly descending, and hanging from the skids, wrapped in a net, was a goat. Christmas present for the Gurkhas. In a great burst of dust, the helicopter touched down. Out jumped a man, bald, blondish, the picture of a British officer. He was also vaguely familiar. I know this bloke, I said aloud. I said aloud. I snapped my fingers. It's good, old Bevan. He had worked for Pa for a few years. He had even chaperoned us one winter to clusters. I recalled him skiing in a bomber jacket, so quintessentially aristocratic. Now, apparently, he was the brigade commander's number two, and thus delivering goats on behalf of the commander to the beloved Gurkhas. I was floored to bump into him, but he was only mildly surprised or interested. He was too preoccupied with those goats. With those goats. Besides the one in the net. Hold on there, gentle people. I don't know what happened. The other phone. All right, there it is. All right, guys, welcome, my lovely people. Thank you all so much for coming. So I was sitting in the car and doing this. I was sitting in the car and doing it with my other phone, and the phone was sitting on the dashboard. and then it just cut off. I looked up and it said it had gotten too hot. You know, the sun is shining today, so it got too hot, so it shut off. So I had to run, come inside and grab another device and open up back the live. Look at my lovely Joseph. Joseph, what's up? Sister Winnie, how are you doing? Welcome to the live. Thank you all so much. You know, I'm doing the quick reading before I hit the road today. I'm just coming home from work. Yeah, I'm just reach home. But you know, the reading gotta go on. I said I'm coming to read, so we're gonna read today. So thank you all so much for coming, guys. Let us continue. I'm not sure where it shut off, so I'm going to start from right here in the middle of chapter 14. When they weren't escorting me, the Gurkhas were intent on fattening me up. Food was their love language, and while each Gurkha thought himself a five-star chef, they all had the same specialty, goat curry. I remember one day hearing rotas overhead. I looked up. Everyone on the base looked up. A chopper slowly descending, and hanging from the skids, wrapped in a net, was a goat. Christmas present for the Gurkhas. In a great burst of dust, the helicopter touched down. Out jumped a man, bald, blondish, the picture of a British officer. He was also vaguely familiar. I know this bloke, I said aloud. I snapped my fingers. It's good old Bevan. He had worked for Pa for a few years. He had even chaperoned us one winter to clusters. I recalled him skiing in a banjo jacket, so quintessentially aristocratic. Now, apparently, he was the brigade commander's number 2, and thus delivering goats on behalf of the commander of the beloved Gurkhas. I was floored to bump into him, but he was only madly surprised or interested. He was too preoccupied with those goats. Besides the one in the net, he had cradled one between his knees on the whole flight, and he now guided this little fellow on a lead like a cocker spaniel over to the Gurkhas. Poor Bevan! I could see how I'd bonded with that goat, how unprepared he was for what was coming. The Gurkha took out his gukri and lopped off its head. Wow. His gukri is his knife, his weapon, took off the head. The tan, bearded face dropped to the ground like one of the taped-up loo rolls we used for rugby balls. The Gurkha then neatly, expertly collected the blood in a cup. Nothing was to be wasted. As for the second goat, the Gurkha handed me the gukri. Asked if I'd like to do the honors. Back home, I had several gukris. They'd been gifts from Gurkhas. I knew how to handle one, but no. I said no. No, thank you. Not here. Not just now. I wasn't sure why I said no. Maybe because there was enough killing all around me without adding more. I flashed back to telling George that I absolutely didn't want to slip off any balls. Where did I draw the line? At suffering. That's where. I didn't want to go all Henry VIII on that goat, mainly because I wasn't skilled in the art. And if I missed or miscalculated, the poor thing would suffer. The Gurkha nodded. As you wish, Saab. He swung the Gurkha. Even after the goat's head hit the ground, I remember its yellow eyes kept blinking. Chapter 15. My job at Delhi was similar to the one I'd had at Dwyer, only the hours were different. Constant. At Delhi, I was on call day and night. The ops room was a former classroom, like seemingly everything else in Afghanistan. The school that housed Delhi had been bombed, dangling wood beams, tripped over desks, floors scattered with spilled papers and books, but the ops room looked as if it had been ground zero. A disaster area. On the plus side, though, during night shifts, the many holes in the walls gave a stunning view of the stars. I recall one shift around 1 a.m. I asked the pilot overhead for his code so I could key it into a rover and see his feed. The pilot answered sourly that I was doing it wrong. Doing it wrong? It's not the rover, it's the Longhorn. The Long what? You are new, huh? He described the Longhorn, a machine no one had bothered to tell me about. I looked around, found it. Big black briefcase covered with dust. I brushed it off, turned it on. The pilot talked me through getting it operational. I didn't know why the Longhorn was required for him instead of the rover, but I wasn't about to ask and irritate him even more, especially since the experience had been bonding. Thereafter, he and I were mates. His call sign was Magic. I'd often pass an entire night chatting to Magic. He and his crew liked to talk, to laugh, eat. I dimly recall them feasting one night on fresh crabs. Above all, they loved practical jokes. After one sortie, Magic zoomed out his camera, took, told me to look. I leaned into my screen. From 20,000 feet, his view of the curvature of Earth was astonishing. Slowly, he turned his camera. My screen filled with breasts. Porn magazine. Oh, you got me, Magic. Some pilots were women. Exchanges with them were very different. One night, I found myself speaking to a British pilot who mentioned how gorgeous the moon was. It's full, she said. You should see it. Widow 67, you should see it. I see it through one of the holes in my wall. Lovely, I said. Suddenly, the radio burst to life, a shrill chorus. The guys back at Dwyer told us to get a room. I felt myself blushing. I hoped the pilot hadn't thought I was flirting. I hoped she wouldn't think so now. Above all, I hoped she and all other pilots would have worked out who I was and tell the British press that I was using the war as a way to meet women. I hope the press wouldn't then treat her as they treated every other girl I'd ever had anything to do with. Hey Joe, what's up? Before that shift ended, however, the pilot and I overcame this brief awkwardness and did some solid work together. She helped me monitor a Taliban bunker right in the heart of no man's land, not far beyond Delhi's walls. There were thermals around the bunker, human forms, a dozen, I guessed, maybe 15. Taliban for sure, we said. Who else would be moving in those trenches? I went through the checklist to make sure. Pattern of life. The army called it. Can you see women? Can you see children? Can you see dogs, cats? Is there anything to indicate that this target might be next door to a hospital, a school? Any civilians, they called civvies. Any civvies whatsoever? No, all no. It added up to Taliban and nothing but Taliban. I planned a strike for the next day. I was assigned to work it out with two American pilots, Dude 01 and Dude 02. I briefed them on the target, told them I wanted a 2,000-pound JDAM, Joint Direct Attack Munition. I wondered why we used that clunky name. Why not just call it a bomb? Maybe because this was no ordinary bomb. It had radar-controlled guidance systems, and it was heavy. It weighed as much as a black rhino. Typically, with a smattering of Taliban fighters, the standard request would be a 500-pounder. But I didn't think that would be enough force to penetrate the fortified bunkers I was seeing on my screen. Granted, FACs never thought 500 pounds was enough. We always wanted 2,000-pounders. Go big or go home, we always said. But in this case, I felt strongly that only big would do the job. The bunker system would withstand anything less. Not only did I want a 2,000-pound JDM, JDAM on top of the bunker, I wanted the second aircraft to follow up with a 20 millimeter, strafe the trenches running from the bunkers, pick off the guys as they exfiled. Negative, said Dude 01. The Americans saw no need for a 2,000-pound bomb. We prefer to drop two 500-pound bombs. Widow 67, hey Norland. We prefer to drop two 500-pound bombs. Widow 67. How very un-American. I felt strongly that I was right, and I wanted to argue, but I was new and lacked self-confidence. This was my first airstrike, so I just said, Roger that. New Year's Eve, I held the F-15s at bay about 8 kilometers, so the noise of their engine wouldn't spook the targets. When conditions looked to be just right, all calm, I summoned them. Widow 67, we are in hot. Dude 01, Dude 02, you are cleared hot, cleared hot, cleared hot. They went streaking towards the target. On my screen, I watched the pilot's crosshair settle over the bunker. 1 second, 2, white flash, loud bang. The wall of the ops room shuddered. Dust and pieces of stone rained down from the ceiling. I heard Dude 01's voice, Delta Hotel, direct hit. Stand by for BDA, battle damage assessment. Plumes of smoke rose from the desert. Moments later, just as I had feared, Taliban came running out of the trenches. I groaned at my rover, then stomped outside. The air was cold, the sky pulsing blue. I could hear Dude 01 and Dude 02 way above, tailing off. I could hear the echo of their bombs. Then all was silent. Not all of them got away. I consoled myself. 10 at least didn't make it out of that trench. Still, a bigger bomb would have really done the trick. Next time, I told myself, next time I'll trust my gut. Chapter 16. I got promoted, sort of, to a small lookout high above the battlefield. For quite some time, the lookout had been driving the Taliban mad. We had it, they wanted it, and if they couldn't get it, then they were bound to destroy it. They had attacked the lookout scores of times in the months before I got there. Hours after my arrival at the lookout, here they came again. AK-47s rattling, bullets whizzing by. It sounded like someone throwing beehives through our window. There were 4 Gurkhas with me, and they unleashed a javelin missile in the direction of the incoming fire. Then they told me to take a seat behind the 50 cal jump on Saab. Jump on, Saab. I climbed into the gun nest, grabbed the big handles. I shoved in my earplugs, took aim through the mesh hanging from the window. I squeezed the trigger. The feeling was like a train through the middle of my chest. The sound was locomotive-like as well. Chugga, 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 chugga. The gun spat bullets across the desert, and shell casings flew around the lookout like popcorn. It was the first time I'd ever fired a 50 cal. I simply couldn't believe the power. In my direction line of sight was abandoned farmland, ditches, trees. I lit it all up. There was an old building with 2 domes that looked like a frog's eyes. I peppered those domes. Meanwhile, Dwyer began lobbing it big guns. All was mayhem. I don't remember much after that, but I don't need to. There's video. The press was there, by my side, filming. I hated them being there, but I'd been ordered to take them on an outwing. In return, they had agreed to sit on my images or information they gathered until I was out of the country. How many did we kill? The press wanted to know. We couldn't be sure. Indeterminate, he said. I thought I'd be in that lookout for a long time, but soon after that day, I was summoned up north to FOB Edinburgh. Welcome into the lab, guys. It's Friday. We are continuing to read Spear by Prince Harry, and we are now well into it. We are at page 146 of 410. So we are moving along. I boarded a Chinook full of mailbags, lay down among them to hide. 40 minutes later, I was hopping off into knee-deep mud. When the hell did it rain? I was shown to the, I was shown to the quarters in a sandbag house, a tiny bed, and a roommate, Estonian signals officer. We hit it off. He gave me one of his badges as a welcome gift. 5 miles away was Musakala, a town that had once been a Taliban fortress. In 2006, we had seized it after some of the worst fighting British soldiers had seen in half a century. More than 1,000 Taliban had been subdued. After paying such a price, however, the town was quickly, carelessly lost again. Now we had won it a second time, and we aimed to keep it. And a nasty job it was. One of our lads had just been blown up by an IED. Plus, we were despised in and around the town. Locals who had cooperated with us had been tortured, their heads put on spikes along the town walls. There would be no winning of either hearts or minds. Chapter 17. I went on patrol. I drove with a convoy of scimitar tanks from FOB Edinburgh through Musakala and beyond. The road took us down through a wadi in which we soon came upon an IED, the first one I had encountered. It was my job to call in the bomb experts. 1 hour later, the Chinook arrived. I found it a second location for landing, threw a smoke grenade to indicate the best spot and to show which way the wind was blowing. A team quickly hopped out, approached the IED. Slow, painstaking work. It took them forever. Meanwhile, we were all totally exposed. We expected Taliban contact any second. Around us, we heard whizzing motorbikes, Taliban scouts, no doubt, clocking our location. When the motorbikes got too close, we fired flare guns, warning them off. In the distance were poppy fields. I looked off, thought of the famous poem, "In Flanders fields the poppies blow." In Britain, the poppy was a symbol of remembrance, but here it was just the coin of the realm. All those poppies would soon be processed into heroin, sales of which would pay for the Taliban bullets fired at us, and the IEDs left for us on the roads and wadis. Like this one, at last the bomb expert blew up the IED. A mushroom cloud shot into the air, which was so dust saturated you couldn't think there could be room for any more. Then they packed up and left, and we continued north, deeper and deeper into the desert. Chapter 18. We made a square of our vehicles, which we called a harbor. The next day and the next day, and so on, we ventured out to do patrols around the town. Show of presence, we were told. Keep moving, we were told. Keep the Taliban wandering, we were told. Keep him off balance. Overall, however, the base mission was to support an ongoing American offensive. There was a constant roar of American jets overhead and explosions in the nearby village. We worked in very close concert with the Americans, engaging the Taliban in frequent firefights. A day or two after we had established our harbor, we were sitting on high ground, watching shepherds in the distance. All we could see for miles around were these men and their sheep. The scene looked innocent enough, but the shepherds were getting too close to the Americans, making them nervous. The Americans fired several warning shots. Inevitably, they hit one of the shepherds. He had been riding a motorbike. We couldn't tell from our distance if it had been an accident or deliberate. We watched the sheep scatter. then saw the Americans swoop in and pick up the shepherds. When they had gone, I went out into the field with a few Fijian soldiers and picked up the motorbike. I wiped it down, put it aside, took care of it. After the Americans had questioned the shepherd, bandaged and released him, he came to us. He was shocked that we had retrieved his motorbike. He was more shocked that we had cleaned it, and he nearly passed out when we gave it back. Chapter 19. The next day, or perhaps the day after, our convoy was joined by 3 journalists. I was ordered to take them into the battlefield, give them a tour, with an explicit understanding that the news embargo was still in effect. I was in a Spartan, up front of the convoy. The journalists stood inside. They kept popping up, nagging me. They wanted to get out, just some photos, just some film. But it wasn't safe. The Americans were still clearing the area. I was standing in the turret when one journalist tapped my leg, asked yet again for permission to get out. I sighed, okay, but be careful of mines and stay close. They all piled out of the Spartan, started setting up their camera. Moments later, the guys ahead of us came under attack. Rounds went whizzing over our heads. The journalist froze, looked at me, helpless. Don't just stand there. Get back in. I don't want them there in the first place, but I especially don't want anything bad to happen to them on my watch. I didn't want any journalist's life on my leisure. I couldn't handle the irony. Was it hours later or days that we learned the Americans had dropped a Hellfire missile on the nearest village? There were many injured. A boy was brought out of the village, up the ridge, in a wheelbarrow, his legs hanging over the side. They were ripped to pieces. 2 men were pushing the wheelbarrow straight towards us. I couldn't tell who they were to the boy. Family? Friends? When they reached us, they weren't able to explain. None spoke English, but the boy was in a shit state. That was clear, and I watched as our medics quickly began treating him. One interpreter tried to calm the boy, while also trying to learn the facts about his escorts. How did this happen? Americans. I was edging closer, but I was stopped by a sergeant on his 6th tour. No, boss, you don't want to see this. You'll never be able to get it out of your head if you do. I backed off. Minutes later, a whistle, then a zip, a huge explosion behind us. I felt it in my brain. I looked around. Everyone was on their stomachs except me and 2 others. Where did that come from? A few of our guys pointed into the distance. They were desperate to return fire and asked me for permission. Yes, but the Taliban who fired were already gone. We had missed our chance. We waited for the adrenaline to fade, for the ringing in our ears to stop. It took a long time. I remember one of our guys whispering over and over, "Fuck me, that was close. Fuck me, that was close." We tried for hours to piece it all together. What happened? Some of us believed the Americans wounded that boy. Others felt that the boy had been a pawn in a classic Taliban feint. The wheelbarrow thing had been a little charade designed to keep us on the hill, distracted, immobile, so the Taliban could fix our position. The enemy had messed up that boy in the barrow, then used it as a bait. Why did the boy and the men go along with it? Because if they didn't, they'd be dead, along with everyone they loved. Chapter 20. We could see the lights of Musa Qala in the distance, February 2008. Our tanks were in a harbor, and we were eating dinner out of bags, talking in low voices. After the meal, around midnight, I went on a radio stag. Sitting in the back of a Spartan, the big door open, I had the desk pulled down, and I was taking notes off the radio. My only light was a dim bulb overhead in a wire cage. The stars in the desert sky were brighter than that bulb and seemed closer. I was running the radio off the Spartan's battery, so every now and then I'd start the engine to give the battery a chance at a little charge. I didn't like making noise for fear of attracting the Taliban's attention, but I had no choice. After a while, I tidied up the Spartan, poured myself a cup of hot chocolate from a thermos, which didn't warm me. Nothing could. The desert could get so cold. I was wearing desert combats, desert boots, a green puffer, a wool beanie, and still shivering. I tweaked the radio's volume, tried to pick up the voices between its crackles and squelches. Mission reports being sent in, info about mail deliveries, messages being passed through battle group net, none of which related to my squadron. Hey G, what's up? How you doing, Marlon? Money Move, what's up, brother? How are you doing? Good to see you. I think it was about 1 a.m. when I heard several people talking about Red Fox. Zero Alpha, the officer in command, was telling everyone that Red Fox this and Red Fox that. I jotted a few notes, but stopped writing and looked up at the stars when I heard them mention C Squadron. The voices were saying that this Red Fox was in trouble, no doubt about it. I made one, I made one that Red Fox was a person. Had he done something wrong? No. Were others planning to do him wrong? Yes. Judging from the tone of the voices, Red Fox was about to be murdered. I swallowed a mouthful of hot chocolate and blinked at the radio and knew with total certainty that Red Fox was me. Now the voices were saying more explicitly that Red Fox cover had been blown, that he was exposed to the enemy, that he needed to be extracted immediately. Fuck, I said. Fuck, fuck that. My mind placed back to Eton, the fox I'd glimpsed when stoned from the window of the loo. So he really had been a messenger from the future after all. One day you'll be alone late at night in the darkness, hunted like me. See how you like that. Next day we went on patrol and I was full on paranoid, worried I'd be recognized. I wore a shima tightly around my face with blackened out goggles, while keeping my head on a swivel and my finger tight on the trigger of my machine gun. After dusk, special forces collected me, their Chinook escorted by two Apaches. I was chatting with over the radio. They flew me across the valley, back to FOB Edinburgh. We landed in darkness, and I couldn't see a thing. I ran into the FOB, then into a green canvas tent, where it was even darker. I heard a squeak. A soft light came on. A man stood before me, screwing a small light bulb into a socket dangling from the roof. Colonel Ed. His long face seemed longer than I remembered, and he was wearing a long green overcoat, like something straight out of the First World War. He filled me in on what happened. An Australian magazine had outed me, told the world I was in Afghanistan. The magazine was inconsequential, so no one noticed at first. But then some bell end in America picked up the story, posted it on his worthless website, and that got picked up by the crawlers. Now the news was everywhere. The worst kept secret in the Milky Way was the presence of one Prince Harry in Helmand province. Trevor did not know you. Anna, me a curse at the book me a read. I'm just reading the book, sweetheart. I'm just reading the book. That's all I'm doing. It's reported speech, not me cussing, honey. But I cuss every now and then.
Yeah, I got to admit, I cuss every now and then. Yeah. But anywho, if I offended you, my sincere apologies. It's just the book. And when I get into the book, I kind of call all the words. Let's continue. So you are out. Colonel Ed apologized. He knew this wasn't when or how I wanted to end my tour of duty. On the other hand, he wanted me to know that his superiors had been pressing for weeks to pull me. So I was lucky the tour hadn't been shorter. I'd eluded the powers that be and the Taliban and managed to put together a respectable long stint with a sterling record. Bravo, he said. I was on the verge of begging to stay, but I could see there was no chance. My presence would put everyone around me in grave peril, including Colonel Ed. Now that the Taliban knew I was in the country and roughly where they'd throw everything they had into killing me. The same story as 1 year earlier. They'd throw everything they had into killing me. The army didn't want me dying, but it was the same story as 1 year earlier. The army was extra keen that others not die because of me. I share that sentiment. I shook Colonel Ed's hand, left the tent. I grabbed my few belongings, said a few quick goodbyes, then jumped back into the Chinook, which was still running, turning, and burning. Within an hour, I was back in Kandahar. I showered, shaved, got ready to catch a big plane bound for England. There were other soldiers milling around, waiting to board as well. Their mood was very different. They were all jubilant, going home. I stared at the ground. Eventually, we all began to realize that the boarding process was taking an inordinately long time. What's the holdup? We asked impatiently. A crew member said we were waiting on one last passenger. Who? A Danish soldier's coffin was being loaded into the cargo hold. We all fell silent. When we eventually got on and took off, the curtain at the front of the plane swung open briefly. I could see three guys on hospital beds. I unbuckled my seatbelt, walked up the aisle, and discovered three gravely injured British soldiers. One, I recall, had gruesome injuries from an IED. Another was wrapped head to toe in plastic. Despite being unconscious, he was clutching a test tube containing bits of shrapnel removed from his neck and head. I spoke with the doctor caring for them, asked if the lads would live. He didn't know. But even if he did, he said they faced a very tough road. I felt angry with myself for having been so self-absorbed. I spent the rest of that flight thinking about the many young men and women going home in similar shape and all the ones not going home at all. I thought about the people at home who didn't know the first thing about this war by choice. Many opposed it, but few knew a damn thing about it. I wondered why. Whose job was it to tell them? Oh, yes, I thought, the press. I landed on March 1st of 2008. The obligatory press conference stood between me and a proper meal. I held my breath, went before the chosen reporter, answered his questions. He used the word hero, which I wouldn't stand for. The heroes are the guys on the plane, not to mention the guys still back at Delhi and Dwyer and Edinburgh. I walked out of the room, straight into Willie and Pa. I think Willie hugged me. I think I gave Pa a kiss on each cheek. He might also have squeezed my shoulder. It would have appeared to anyone at a distance a normal family greeting and interaction. But for us, it was a flamboyant, unprecedented demonstration of physical affection. Then they both stared at me, wide-eyed. I looked exhausted, haunted. You look older, Pa said. I am. We piled into Pa's Audi and zoomed off towards Highgrove. Along the way, we spoke as if we were in a library, very hushed. How are you, Harold? Oh, I don't know. How are you? Not bad. How's Kate? Good. I miss everything. No, same old, same old, same old. I rolled down the window, watched the countryside fly by. My eyes couldn't quite absorb all that color, all that green. I breathed in the fresh air and wondered which was the dream, the months in Afghanistan or this trip in the car, the guns of the wire, uh, the guns of the wire, the beheaded goats, the boy in the wheelbarrow. Was that reality? Or was reality these soft leather seats and Pa's cologne? Chapter 22. I was given a month off. I spent the first part of it with mates. They heard I was home, rang me up, asked me out for a drink. Okay, but just one. A place, a place called the Cat and Custard Pot. Me, sitting in a dark corner, nursing a gin and tonic. Them, laughing and chatting and making all sorts of plans for trips and projects and holidays. Everyone seemed so loud. Had they always been so loud? They all said I seemed quiet. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I guess so. How come? No reason. I just felt like being quiet. I felt out of place, a bit distant. At times, I felt sort of panicky. At other times, I felt angry. Do you folks know what's happening on the other side of the world right now? After a day or two, I rang Chelsea, asked to see her, begged. She was in Cape Town. She invited me to come. Yes, I thought, that's what I need right now, a day or two with Chelsea and her folks. After, she and I ran off to Botswana, met up with the gang. We started at Teef and Mike's house. Big hugs and kisses at the door. They had been worried sick about me. Then they fed me, and Mike kept handing me drinks, and I was in the place I loved most. Under the skies I loved most. So happy that at one point I wondered if I might not have tears in my eyes. A day or two later, Chelsea and I drifted upriver on a rented houseboat, the Kuba Queen. We cooked simple meals, slept on the upper deck of the boat under the stars, gazing at the Orion Belt, the Little Dipper. I'd try to I'd try to decompress, but it was hard. The press got wind of our trip, and they were popping us constantly every time the boat neared the shore. Welcome, guys. Thank you all for coming into the live. We are reading Spare by Prince Harry, and we do an hour a day. After a week or so, we went back to Mon, ate a farewell dinner with Teef and Mike. Everyone turned in early, but I sat up with Teef, told her a bit about the war, just a bit. It was the first time I'd spoken of it since arriving home. Willie and Pad asked, but they hadn't asked the way Teef asked, nor had Chelsea. Did she tiptoe around the subject because she still disliked my going, or because she knew it would be hard for me to talk about it? I wasn't sure, and I felt that she wasn't sure, that neither of us was sure about anything. Teef and I talked about that too. She likes me, I said, loves me, I guess, but she doesn't like the baggage that comes with me, doesn't like everything that comes with being royal, the press, and so forth, and none of that is ever going away. So what hope is there? Teef asked point blank if I could see myself married to Chelsea. I tried to explain. I cherished Chelse's carefree and authentic spirit. She never worried about what other people thought. She wore short skirts and high boots, danced with abandon, drank as much tequila as I did, and I cherished all those things about her. But I couldn't help worrying how Granny might feel about them or the British public. And the last thing I wanted was for Charles to change to accommodate them. I wanted so badly to be a husband, a father, but I just wasn't sure. It takes a certain kind of person to withstand the scrutiny. Teef and I don't know if Charles can handle it. I don't know what I want to that I want to ask her to handle it either. All right, we are going to do chapters 23 and 24 before we sign off for today. Come back and join me tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about the book so far, and we are going to talk about some of what we have learned in the book tomorrow. All right. So tomorrow morning, bright and early, we are going to come back, but we are not going to be reading first thing tomorrow morning. We are going to be talking about some of the things we have learned in the book so far. So come on out. You never know. I might just throw a little prize in there. You never know. You never know. But you know, with me, you never know what you're gonna what to expect, because you never know what you're gonna get. But tomorrow at around 8 o'clock Eastern time, we will be doing that. Alrighty, guys. So listen carefully and be sure to come out tomorrow morning when we will be doing that sort of a guess, sort of a quiz of sorts, kind of. Okay? Chapter 23. The press reported breathlessly on our return to Britain how we dashed to Chelsea's off-campus flat in Leeds, where she lived with two girls whom I trusted and who, more importantly, trusted me, and how I snuck into their flat disguised in a hoodie and baseball cap, giving her flatmates a laugh, and how I love pretending to be a university student, going for pizza and hanging out in pubs, even wondering if I had made the right choice in skipping university, not one word of which was true. All right. I went to Chelsea Leeds flat twice. I barely knew her mates, and I never once regretted my decision to skip university. But the press was getting worse. They were now just peddling phantasms, what phantasm, while physically stalking and harassing me and everyone in my inner circle. Chelsea told me that Paps had been following her to and from lectures. She asked me to do something about it. I told her I'd try. I told her how sorry I was. When she was back in Cape Town, she phoned me and said people were tailing her everywhere and it was driving her crazy. She couldn't imagine how they always knew where she was and where she'd be. She was freaking out. I talked it over with Marco, who advised me to ask Chelsea's brother to check the underside of the car. Sure enough, a tracking device. Marco and I were able to tell her brother exactly what to do and how to check for and where to check for, because it had happened to so many other people around me. Chelsea said again that she just wasn't sure if she was up for this. A lifetime of being stalked? What could I say? I miss her so much, but I completely understood her desire for freedom. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want this life either. All right, guys, that's going to be it. My eyes are starting to burn. That means sleep is upon me. So, guys, we have stopped. We are going to stop for today. We have read up to page 156 of this book, and I believe by the end of February, maybe, we should be finished reading this book so that we can move on to some other readings. All right. I think I'm going to stop here for today. I thank you all for coming in. Thank you all for listening. And I hope you all enjoyed me reading this book, Spare, to you as much as I enjoy reading it to you. Thanks again, my friends, Marlon and Narlan and Joseph and Sister Winnie and AG Born Jamaican and who else was here? Everybody else who came in, and those who came in but said not a word, but stood on the outside and looked in. I sincerely appreciate you for just stopping by. Everybody is appreciated, no matter your role, whether you come in the chat, say something, or you choose not to, or you stand by and you watch me and you say, Kupanar, watch her, what she do. No matter what, your contribution is appreciated. So thanks again, guys, for coming in. I will see you all again on live later today. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Trebessence, where your journey matters